Hi, Rick here, and well, there is relatively little known on the subject of today's Cultural Index video, the Malon of Star Trek's Delta Quadrant, and they're only ever encountered in one capacity, and seen in a single murky light. From what we see, their entire culture seems to orbit around the disposal of waste, and while technically true, I guess, there is far more that we don't see. For example, the homeworld of the Malon is Malon Prime, which I have to admit always bugs me when the home planet is called the same as the species. Side tangent here, but my rationalisation for this is that the Universal Translator defaults to naming a home planet after the species, then adding Prime to the end of it if the name is unrecognised by Starfleet or something. Anyway, Malon Prime is a beautiful and verdant M-class world located in the Delta Quadrant, end of the galaxy, and as the USS Voyager never visited it, we don't have exact coordinates for it. They are a warp-capable and advanced species, however their technology is lacking in several areas, but we can get to that in a minute. The leadership of the Malon Cooperative is in the form of a government called the Sanctity, though little else is known. The territory that the Malon occupy seems rather expansive given their first encounter in 2375 in the Void, and the subsequent 30,000 light years travelled by the USS Voyager before their next encounter. This is likely due to the Malon's extensive travelling distance to find uninhabited and isolated areas of space, and that their true territory is much smaller, somewhere in the centre of this 30,000 light year range. Doesn't narrow it down much, I know. There are references that among its many exports is a grain called theta and another plant called smap, which would suggest a blooming agricultural industry which meshes with Malon descriptions of their planet as thriving. It is also rumoured to be full of beautiful scenery and fresh air, but all this is a veneer over a grubby core. You see, although they have harnessed the power of matter-antimatter reactions to produce great energy, such as that which operates their warp drives, they have yet to reach the level of advancement in this field that powers like the United Federation of Planets have, or even the Klingons. The matter-antimatter reactions, which are used to power their entire society, have no way to process or dispose of the residual waste that can be produced by certain reactors. The waste is highly toxic and most notably produces high levels of theta radiation. This sort of dirty reaction was overcome by humanity, with one of the only vessels to produce theta radiation being the Phoenix, Zephram Cochrane's legendary Warp 1 vessel. The waste produced by their society is around 6 billion isotons, and is routinely exported from the planet via the disposal union, and therein lies the problem. The waste disposal business is very profitable for those involved, even though a hazardous occupation. This meant that there is a great focus from individuals within the industry to resist change to the status quo in order to maximise profits. For this reason, the development of a cleaner energy source has been artificially postponed by payoffs and a lack of funding into alternatives. The waste is loaded into large export vessels which vary in design and size from smaller single-pod cells to supertankers that carry 8 times the waste and can be up to 730 metres long. The tankers themselves are constructed of darker metals that are usually slightly degraded and warped from radiation damage. It's likely that the vessels were originally of much higher standard, but constant use has taken its toll. Inside the vessel is a dark and dingy atmosphere that would be a health and safety inspector's nightmare. Facilities on the larger ships include decontamination facilities and medical bays. The crew members and labourers themselves have to wear protective suits to help counter the intense theta radiation and take routine analeptic injections. The dangers of theta radiation include fatigue, hallucinations and nausea to begin with, followed by the appearance of skin lesions and boils. These symptoms increase in severity with prolonged exposure until the point of complete cellular breakdown and the liquefaction of organic matter. The radiation also has damaging effects on non-organic matter with time and can even distort subspace. Despite all this, it does have its uses in early treatments for removing pathogens by irradiating them, and exposure can be treated with anti-radiation treatments such as erythrosine. The medical know-how of the Malon seems to be adequate, but nothing compared to Starfleet levels, with many disposal crews succumbing to freighter blight, a name given to the mild radiation sickness and considered a general occupational hazard. Crews on these waste export vessels seem to apply for runs and pick an occupation, with the highest paid jobs being that of a core labourer. These individuals operate closest to the source of the radiation and have a survivability of 30% per run. 2 months of core labour is enough to equate to a lifetime's worth of payout, but the survivability is so low that this money is usually paid to the family of the worker. The captain of a freighter is called the controller, and can be distinguished by the dark blue suit that they wear. Your everyday citizens, however, look at the whole process as a necessity of everyday life, and respect those who sign on to disposal crews as acting out of a civic duty. A lot of care does go into the disposal of the waste, with numerous safety features to contain the harmful toxins, and the selection of isolated and uninhabited areas of space to dump it. However, the rundown state of equipment and the lacklustre medical care leaves much room for improvement, and accidents can and do happen. On top of all of this, some of the more unscrupulous controllers may prioritise a quick paycheck over observing proper safety, and dump the materials in less than ideal locations. There are also myths centred around the spacefaring race. In particular, Vihar is a bogeyman of sorts that lurks in the bowels of vessels. The hazardous and grim atmosphere of the bloated boats conducive to the spread of this myth. The truth of these tales may be centred around the rare few individuals with a theta radiation resistance who still succumb to its necrotising and damaging effects. Such inflicted people, often core workers, can find themselves broken by the pain and resorting to violence and irrational thought until they perish. For the reason of containment, the Malon ships tend to have very powerful shielding and are armed with spatial charges to protect their runs. They seem to excel at industrial occupations such as ship construction alongside their export business, and some sources state that ship construction is one of their chief exports. Malon names seem to adhere to a convention of being in few syllables, with a male name ending in a harsh K sound, such as Pelk, Emk, Vrelk, Fesek and Dremk, while the only female name we see does not, that being Sivad. Their written language, much like their ships, seems to favour circular lettering, as seen in their ships' computer interfaces. A sign of respect for a deceased Malon is to touch 2 fingers to their forehead of the deceased, then to themselves in a sign of remembrance. I wish there were more we got to see beyond their dumping industry, but it seems to be the only aspect ever explored in both the show and extra materials, and as an analogy to environmental damage. We only hear about the society that their actions protect, as well as witness the damaging effects of their dirty operations. So, have you come across any other Malon lore that I have missed? Let's see what else we can dig up. Thanks again for watching, and as usual there is a vote on the next index's choices, which should be both in the comments below and on the community page as a vote. So leave your choices in either or both, and we'll see how this works out. The choices for the next species are either the non-humanoid and extreme environmentally preferring Tholians of Trek, or, from the Star Wars universe, also of non-human form, the Hutts. Let me know which you'd like to see next, and until the next video, I've been Rick, and I'll see you again. Thanks again, and goodbye.